Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today, we have a very special video for you. I have a special guest here with me today, Mr. Dudley Brown from the National Association for Gun Rights. And we're going to be diving into a little bit of conversation here today. And we thought that we'd throw out a really tough question that, if I have to say so myself, Dudley, not many people really know, I believe, the kind of true answer to this question. And that question would be, why is it that over all of these decades that the Second Amendment has been treated as a second-rate right under the Supreme Court? Why do we not see as many Supreme Court cases being brought up and heard for the Second Amendment? I think without putting myself out there too bad and risking being wrong, there's been a super high amount of First Amendment cases that have gone through the Supreme Court. I think like over 500 or 600 cases related to the First Amendment that have gone through the Supreme Court. But why is it that we see such representation from the Supreme Court and what seems to be like a stagnant and stalemate unwillingness to acknowledge concerns that the people have in regards to their Second Amendment rights in the Supreme Court?
Well, now I'm not an attorney, far from it, though I do spend a lot of time looking at law or arguing about it. And this is the best way to answer that question would be to put NAGR as chairman of the board on. He's a high-powered D.C. attorney and Northern Virginia Marine.
We may have to make that happen.
We can make that happen.
Sounds
Dave
good.
Warrington's super sharp guy and litigates in the political space a lot. And of course, our foundation is working on a lot of cases, bringing a lot of cases up through the court systems. But our foundation, National Foundation for Gun Rights, our C3, is relatively young in its overall history. It hasn't done as much, and we're trying to remedy that. Of course, we really haven't put that much emphasis on it. There are a lot of groups that's all they do is file briefs. So what we've seen anyway is that the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't grant certs for a couple of reasons, and I've heard these theories from attorneys, and they say, number one, a lot of the major attorneys within the gun rights movement have not wanted them until recently to make it to the U.S. Supreme Court. They don't think we're going to get a good ruling.
You think that's a concern, that it's obviously not going to go the way they think it's going to go, that they're going to rule against something that they hope is going to go towards gun rights.
Right. And I've heard that on and off for my entire career in politics.
What do you think the current Supreme Court we have now is maybe a little more capable of having a balanced approach?
Maybe, but we do know that Justice Thomas, who's certainly one of the most outspoken and likely most pro-gun members of the U.S. Supreme Court, we do know he has rattled the saber and been frustrated with other justices not wanting to hear and grant cert to gun cases. He keeps saying publicly, bring the gun cases here, and he wants them.
Do you think that there would be a unanimous understanding between them, that maybe Justice Thomas has maybe sort of bumped elbows with a few of the other justices and said, hey, if we really push this issue and got this up in front of us, would you be willing to, look at this under the veil of constitutionality and remove yourself politically from the situation and just judge appropriately according to the Constitution? You think that conversation's been had?
Yeah, well, it's conjecture. I believe certainly there are two or three justices who absolutely won't rule in favor of the Second Amendment under maybe even any circumstance. But I do know that a number of them want to see gun cases. I was actually in front of Judge Gorsuch shortly before he was nominated for the Supreme Court, because he was a judge in Colorado, and we were working on a case, and so I knew he'd be a pretty good choice, at least on guns.
Sure.
And so that's one dynamic is that the justices, I think, at a time, for a while, they just didn't want to see cases because they didn't think they had the votes, actually, the numbers of justices to prevail. And that's been true of advocates. But I've learned a lot of those advocates, frankly, don't know what they're talking about. And I'm not going to say I'm certainly no legal scholar.
Fair.
But their predictions, just none of it ever came true. And all the claims they made just never bore fruit. However, I think the other concern is that gun owners, let me see if I can put it this way, in way I think many Americans will understand. Gun owners sit at the back of the bus. We've been really, really good back of the bus Republicans. I'll just say it. And we really haven't had our Rosa Parks who said, I'm not sitting in the back of the bus. I'm walking right up front. And you can arrest me, you can do what you want, but I'm sitting up here. But we've been relegated to that section by the Republican Party largely. And you can see that in all the little tiny scraps that they're willing to throw us that are, ridiculous.
It's almost like they're oddly comfortable with us being there too. Like they don't care that they're not advancing the course of freedom and advancing the course of gun rights. And they're oddly comfortable with allowing it to stay there in a way that should really alarm people. When you look at, let's say, the average Supreme Court justice, for instance, right? Is that to say that when we look at the people that represent us within the Supreme Court and these people we nominate and everything, well, is that to say that they're the absolute best legal minds that we have to offer and that they are truly going to look at this in a selfless way and really go by the letter of the Constitution and really apply that as literal as they possibly can, and that's their job? Or is it more that the Supreme Court nomination is more of a politically driven nomination where they can go, well, we know that this particular type of justice is going to acquiesce to our political motivations, and they're going to apply that political motivation to the levers of power that is the Supreme Court. So it's like, I think the average person kind of wants to think in their head, well, the Supreme Court is the highest court in the land, and that what they say goes, and it's second only to the Constitution itself, right? In terms of like how high that can go.
But the reason I was describing is that way is that gun owners, we talk amongst ourselves and we talk boldly, but when it comes to politics, the organization that has represented us for a very long time is not bold at all. In fact,
they play the game.
They kind of looked at us. Many of the politicians look at gun owners as a necessary evil, almost like, oh, you guys are just a part of the Republican circle, and we'll bow to you when we have to. We'll nod our head, but we're kind of embarrassed that you show up to the cocktail parties, and because you're not as couth as us. And I'm kind of making fun of it, but it is true in some sense. They don't actually want to, for instance, strip federal gun controls out of federal law. They don't want to actually have a rein on the ATF,
on themselves,
on the ATF. There's very little, I think, will to actually get rid of the ATF. We'd like to abolish the ATF. We don't think it should even exist.
Especially when the things that they do are under a regulatory and lawmaking guise, and it's clearly not within the bounds of, the way that our checks and balances are set up and how we pass laws. So if some alphabet agency can just walk up to the table and go, you know what, we don't like this anymore, and this is the only justification we need to give you, and oh, by the way, none of the people you elected to represent you and actually pass laws that are related to your life had any say in it. So doesn't that actually go outside the checks and balances? I mean, the ATF started out under the IRS and then went away from the IRS over to the DOJ. So did their mission change? when they went from the IRS to the DOJ, right? There's still a tax collecting, element to what they're doing. Like when you pay a $200 tax stamp, it is a tax. They don't hide the fact that it's a tax. It's called a tax. The tax stamp says tax stamp on it. It is a tax. And look at all these Supreme Court cases in the past that have verified that, like such as polling taxes, right? And that, I believe it was a case out of Tennessee there where polling taxes were deemed unconstitutional because you can't place a financial barrier in front of a constitutional right. You cannot charge someone to exercise the right to vote. So under that same logic, why would the Supreme Court not say, well, under this logic, we're going to say, hey, here's a previous Supreme Court ruling, and that was a Supreme Court ruling, Murdoch versus, I'm not even going to try to remember the exact docket. But the point is, though, is why do we not apply that same logic to gun rights? Why should a $200 financial barrier ever have been accepted to be placed in front of the Second Amendment? Like way back in 34, why didn't we fight it back then? Was it just not culturally important enough to people, and have the tides changed now in a way that it is so important to people that they want to see the Supreme Court shoot it down?
So very few people in Congress understand the NFA, understand
or care about
what the regulations are on NFA items, and I know 3 or 4 on hand off the top of my head who actually know. But it's I believe some of it is that we're just so well behaved within the Republican Party, especially until recently. Gun people have basically been on Team R. And once you're on Team R and that's all you care about, well, they take advantage of you. They just assume that you're going to be with them no matter what. And you're
just going to become a token voting bloc at that point. And that's what we've become. It's just a token voting bloc. Do we not find it odd, right, that while the Republicans will sit here and say, hey, let's spend a whole bunch of money on the police and let's militarize the police and let's give them AR-15s with giggle switches in them and suppressors and knives, and let's give them, ex-military vehicles and kit them out so they can conduct their raids and things like that. Do we not see a danger in giving, opening Pandora's box to the militarization of police forces? And then on the same token, those people are going to say, oh, well, your AR-15 is now the devil. But they're not going to fight for your right to own what would essentially be the same tool that these people could use against us in a very real and tyrannical way, and in many cases are, right? You can't, in my opinion, you don't really get to a point where, let's say, well, it's okay that you're doing it because we trust you. I think there's been a severe damage to the amount of trust that the American people have in institutions. And that's a big part. And that's putting it lightly. That's putting it kindly. That's putting it professionally, right? Many people begin to kind of look at the situation like, well, wait a minute. Hang on now. We're paying these taxes. We're doing all this. Why hasn't the Supreme Court solidified my right to bear arms? Why hasn't the Supreme Court voted that this $200 tax stamp is unconstitutional? Why do the Republicans continue to arm all of these people militantly, but yet on the same token, not want to advance anything that could benefit my life directly, which I don't carry around an officer armed with body armor and nods and an AR-15 in the back of my pocket, right? No, I need to have to be my own first responder. So why is it that their lives are more important than ours when they can utilize those resources to damage the people that they disagree with politically, or the very people that they disagree with? But yet, when I want to take my safety into my own hands, I'm all of a sudden the devil, or I'm called every name in the book simply because I just want to be on the same ground as they do.
Yeah. Well,
how do they answer that? How do you articulate that?
I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but there's certainly an elitist attitude, and there's a varying opinions, but I would say that they largely look at us as their possession. In many ways.
Not many people will admit that, Dudley.
I like to admit it because when I started being a quotes gun lobbyist in 1993, I was just appalled as an activist. Somebody really cared about it. I was just appalled watching the way gun owners acted tough, and then they walked into a state capitol with their hat rolled up in their hand. I think the old term was what they call that?
Tip of the hat.
They weren't tipping their hat. They were like touching their forehead almost to their lords and masters, and then almost worshiping these politicians. I'm like, who cares? And they work for us.
That's right. Could the same be said about the Supreme Court? I mean, is it that these people have such an elitist attitude that they will never want to advance anything that would give the peons any perceived or literal power over them?
I don't have enough.
Is that why?
I don't have enough contact. I don't have any contact with the U.S. Supreme Court justices. I mean, I have enough contact.
I'd love to interview them. I'd love to ask them myself. I'd love to hear it.
I don't think they'll come on your show.
No, they won't.
Yeah, but I do talk to and see politicians all the time. That is kind of my job. And as detestable as that might be, when you actually talk to politicians on a regular basis, you know they have that attitude. They have this attitude that that they will manipulate you into the position where you just want to have access to them. And the only way you have access to a politician is you behave. And you basically check your ideology at the door because they're going to offer you little baubles to buy you off. Now, let me use a great example, and I won't use any names, but I remember going to a particular group, a state level group that had a lobbying day at the Capitol. And this is many years ago. And I remember going into the state Capitol. It was legal for them to open carry in this state Capitol. And so I went in there with them and I watched how they did it. And they had these group of people and they all talked really in a big group as really tough about how they were going to force politicians to vote right. And then they went into the state Capitol all strutting around, open carrying a gun. And all these politicians spent 20 minutes with groups of people, patting them on the head. Oh, you guys are great. We love the Second Amendment here. It's great that you can open carry. Those same politicians all hid constitutional carry away in their state, didn't push it. And basically, once they were out of the building, they were like, okay, we're done doing that. Now we get to ignore them.
They get their visibility with who they need to be visible with. They obtain that little token check mark that they get next to their name that says, yes, I took this stance on this, but without actually really, let's just say in terms of legislation, actually moving the needle in any way at all. So it's they get the plausible deniability of going, oh, well, yeah, we support the Second Amendment, but really in practice, not so much.
And think about the 2017 Congress, 2017, 2018. You have a Republican White House. You have a Republican Senate. You have a Republican House. And what happened? Nothing. Bupkis. And in fact, we were promised that the 8-year war on the Second Amendment was over. And guess what happened? It was just paused for a short period of time. And then...
Wasn't over. It was just on the back burner.
And then the bump stock ban happened. Mm-hmm. And a great number of other things, very frankly, almost happened. Well, that was a great case of a lot of the Republicans, members of Congress, and frankly, gun rights activists just accepting, like meekly accepting what our overlords were going to offer us, which was the thought of even deregulating slightly suppressors, for instance, via the Hearing Protection Act. Now,
it's a carrot they're willing to dangle. Now, absolutely. As long as you're going to chase that carrot, they will dangle it all day long.
Now, we had a bill, at the same time, we have a bill that Senator Mike Lee carried and is still carrying now called the SHUSH. And it's, I don't even remember the whole acronym, but it turns a suppressor into nothing, into a bipod or a scope. No regulation whatsoever, the way it should be.
I find it odd that the ATF in their recent, when you look at the brace worksheet, they said, oh, well, the ATF does not regulate accessories. We only regulate complete firearms. Oh, well, do you? You regulate suppressors, and suppressor is an accessory. You cannot shoot a suppressor. A suppressor is not capable of firing a round by itself. A suppressor is an accessory. So
you regulate bump stocks out of existence
to what they even say in their worksheet. Oh, we don't regulate. Well, you regulate bump stocks. You regulate suppressors. You regulate these triggers. Now they're going after these triggers. So it's like, so you're actually liars because you're saying you don't regulate. You only regulate complete firearms, but that's not true. You obviously regulate accessories.
Now, Now, to get back to the legal side,
Sure.
the Supreme Court, we actually don't think that lawsuits and legal fights are the be all end all of firearms policy. And there are groups who do. That's all they do. And there are groups who think if you don't file lawsuits and you're not in court every day, you're not doing anything. Yeah, we reject that notion. That's simply not the case in America. That's not the system we have. However, there are times in which they should be adjudicated. San Jose is a great case. San Jose came up with a new style of gun control, and frankly, they're in a state that's very difficult to hold them accountable, and they violate a great number of constitutional provisions by doing so. They're forcing gun owners in San Jose to try to enter, to join a anti-gun group, and via a membership whenever you buy a gun. Is you actually have to maintain a membership in essentially a anti-gun group.
So they're forcing you to buy a good or service, which is totally not allowed.
And they're forcing you to associate with someone politically.
Right, you're funding the opposition essentially.
Which is definitely a violation of our constitutional rights. And so we think that could end up in the U.S. Supreme Court. We had hoped to back San Jose down, but if not, we want to bring that in the U.S. Supreme Court because, frankly, we think that could gain legs all around the country. Here's a couple other issues. Obviously, the pistol brace issue and the homemade firearms issue.
And the bump stock thing is still kind of in the
bump
air.
stock ban's still there and going through different court cases. But we also look at First Amendment cases are very important to gun owners. If you really think about how we defend our rights, now we defend them with the First Amendment. You going out and talking about politicians, like we're doing right here and now, talking about public policy is covered under the First Amendment. And if you start regulating that or you restrict people's First Amendment rights, you've restricted their ability to fight back. That is the one true thing we have is as a weapon against politicians and tyranny is first and foremost is our First Amendment rights. And so we think litigating those is important. There are many
Public discourse is important. Like getting a conversation started is important, even if it's among you and your friends, your neighbors. I mean, that's where Second Amendment advocacy starts. Is just by being an advocate to all and an ambassador to all the people around you. But then that sort of grows into like when you see this advocacy and lobbying efforts that gun groups like NAGR are putting forth and everything. That is like the culmination of all those efforts. It's like, hey, we're going to be the tip of the spear, and we're going to go in here and make sure these politicians know that if they play ball with our rights, we are going to make their life a very, very difficult situation to be in.
There's nothing that a politician hates more than being challenged for their party nomination.
Yeah,
they think they have a God-given right to being renominated as a member of Congress
certainly
or a state
an
legislator.
Elitist attitude as well. They want to feel like they're your overlord, and when you remove that power from them, it strips away everything they stand for. Every narcissistic tendency that they even live by is related to their power struggle as it relates to the control that they feel like they have over your life. And if you threaten to remove that control, it takes away everything they live for.
And here's the other thing. It's a tall order to defeat incumbents in many ways, although that is mostly what I have cut my teeth doing in politics. We usually run primaries against incumbent Republicans. And however, the battle, the fight against those types, just by fighting that battle, you make all the other politicians look around and go, holy crap,
That could be me.
That could be me. Maybe I should just vote the way they want me to. These guys they're organized. They're in groups. They hunt in packs, so to speak. And we want politicians to think that way. We want them to look around the room and go, I used to be really good friends with Barbara, my state representative next door in the neighborhood next door. But she's not sitting here in this chamber anymore because she crossed that gun group and all of those activists got rid of her. And that's a good, healthy fear. political fear. So we work very hard at that. And if you don't have that, if politicians don't think you somehow are going to play a role in defeating them, at some point, you just might as well stay home. The whole idea of lobbying. Now, I know there are great people with lots of great information and data, and they're going to bring it to a legislator, and they're going to show them why. You know how well that works? It doesn't work.
Yeah. It really
works for their egos.
It's really just the same old good old boy thing that's gotten us where we are now. Just maintained us like where we are now. One thing that I'll mention, we are in the process of getting set up to do some guest spots over the internet. I'm getting some monitors set up. So I would like to have your other gentleman on that you were talking about. What was his
our
name?
Attorney, Dave Warrington.
Yep. Okay. I'd like to have him back, and maybe we can expand on this Supreme Court stuff a little more. I wasn't trying to draw us into a corner here, but I think it's important to have discourse, to talk about it, because, I think that a lot of people in the gun world, people that are Second Amendment advocates and that love to be armed and love to protect their families and their communities, and they view gun ownership as a very important part of their holistic life and the way they live. It's a part of their culture, right? Gun owners feel kind of slighted, right? And when you look at all the various Supreme Court cases that have been heard over the years, and the, let's just say, arguments that were posed for or against in these situations, you kind of think, well, gosh, the Second Amendment is really underrepresented in the highest courts. Now, is that to say that there's some political motivation that they don't want to hear the cases? Is it that we're not being hard enough on all of our lawmakers? I mean, is there more pressure we need to apply somehow? Like, what has to happen for us to create an environment where they will finally acknowledge what we all already know? That's what gets most of us so much. Those of us in the 2A space, where we feel betrayed. It's betrayal. And betrayal is something that doesn't just wash away. Those are deep wounds that they hurt. You lick those wounds over and over and over. And the older you get, the more those scars don't hold up. They bleed and they open back up. And that's hurt. That hurts us. It's betrayal. We feel betrayed. How can people wake up and go, well, they did all of this stuff in relation to these court cases, but yet, all right, the fact that they won't hear them, is it just they hate us, or they want to betray us? Is it a right that they don't recognize? I mean, what's the reason? So it just kind of makes you think, man, what a crazy situation. Like, to think that maybe the Supreme Court could just step in and say, hey, this has gotten stupid, right? Like, look at all the gun laws. Like, after a while, doesn't it, the answer is to just pass more laws? Come on. Yeah, no one believes that.
Yeah, I think the one thing I know for certain after dealing with courts so often is that justices don't step in and say, hey, this is out of control. They react to cases. And so you got to bring cases to them. And red flag. Here's a great example. Red flag. How outrageously asinine is this concept that you can take someone's constitutional rights without them even being present before a judge, in some cases not even being in front of a judge. Right. Even the case
literally a phantom court.
Yes, and you not even know it's happening, and they can take your rights, and in many cases put you in danger, because sending law enforcement out to seize your firearms in your house.
Yeah, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. You don't know who's kicking in your door. You're a law-abiding person, peace-loving person, never done anything wrong in your life, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of men kicking in your door in the middle of the night that you don't know from Adam. What are you supposed to do?
And you didn't have your day in court to defend yourself to that charge. And of course, it's not actually a criminal charge. They're saying you might be a danger, somewhat akin to a Minority Report. And so that
last time I checked, innocent till proven guilty.
Yeah, that is a violation of due process. And so as we see all these state level red flag laws come around, and frankly, even the federal red flag law, which has been carried by Republicans, Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio. And those are cases we want to bring to the U.S. Supreme Court, because I'm no legal scholar, but I don't know how that stands and can stand any real scrutiny.
And I suppose at the end of the day, what a lot of people are asking themselves, and I think it's a valid concern, is there any justice in the courts for us? That's the real question. We can pose all of the court cases we want. At the end of the day, though, is there justice in that building for us?
Yeah.
And I don't know if the answer is yes. I can't objectively say that is the answer is yes to that.
I think
based on my observations.
I don't know. I think in the current court we got a good chance at winning some cases.
The courts do get things right.
We're going to find out. I think this in just a few months on this New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case, and that it's not a be all end all case, but could be important.
I was watching a podcast the other day, and it was Joe Rogan was interviewing Elon Musk, and I thought it was a great interview. By the way, Elon Musk I can see where he'd be a hard person to interview, but the point is, at one point, Elon was talking about some random type of legal kerfuffle that he was involved in, and it wound up being resolved. And Elon kind of made the point. He's like, look, our court system is complicated, but I do feel like they get things right more often than not. And you know what? I'm inclined to agree that in many situations, the things that go through the courts, that yes, that justice is served and that things are resolved in a very fair and concise way. However, when we look at under the lens of the Second Amendment, I feel like that representation has been a little bit limited.
Well, I think you're probably right. I'm actually anxious to hear that question asked of Dave Warrington.
Yes. Stay tuned. We're going to do that one.
Yeah. I'll make sure that happens.
Okay.
And
awesome. Let's put it together.
And I'll watch it.
That'd be great.
Assiduously. So.
Yeah. And hopefully I can ask proper questions. I mean, look, as an interviewer, guys, like all I can do is just have a conversation and I can ask people, what's on my mind and we can talk about it. And that's the way I try to make these types of, content and everything. And I love having guest spots. And Dudley, I really appreciate you hanging out with me here today. Thanks for taking some questions. And guys, go over to NAGR, support them if you want to. They're a great group of people. I think that what you guys are doing, Dudley, is you're doing great work. And I'm really hoping that y'all, continue to get support from millions of more Americans like you have been. I mean, y'all have got a lot of members, and I think y'all are moving the needle in a positive way. And I'm really excited to see what you guys are going to accomplish in the future, and I hope to be a part of it in any way that I can. And big thanks for hanging out with us today.
Thank you, Eric.
All right. Guys, many more videos on the way. Thanks for tuning in. Go over to Ballistic Inc. and pick yourself up a snazzy new t-shirt. That is one way you can support our efforts directly if you wish. Also, make sure you go over and follow Dudley on all of the various social media accounts. Where can they find you, real quick?
Yeah, gunrights.org is the central clearinghouse for our website, and that connects you to YouTube and everything else.
Gotcha. And your YouTube channel?
Yeah, YouTube channel, National Association for Gun Rights.
Awesome. Y'all got some great gun videos, by the way.
Yeah,
and I'm happy that I've been a part of some of them. Some of you might have seen them and might not yet, but I'm going to have a few little guest spots on their channel as well. So make sure you subscribe to their YouTube channel, check out their content. Thank you guys. Many more videos on the way, and we will revisit this question with your lawyer.
Sounds
How about
good.
that?
Sounds good.
Have a good one.